to our 12th program of Georgian Bay Reads. I am Jody Claire Delgado, CEO of Springwater Public Library, and the Georgian Bay Reads Committee is very happy to welcome you with us here for this virtual evening. I would like to thank our two technicians, Gordon and Chantel, who've been working hard behind the scenes to make this event happen. We would not be able to do this without them. Let's have a round of applause. Don't forget to vote for the People's Choice Award online. The voting will close at the end of intermission. The Google form for voting is on our webpage, www.georgianbayreads.ca, and Georgian Bay Reads event page on Facebook. Usually, the previous year's winner is our moderator. It is with great sadness we have to announce that in early 2021, we lost Jack Pledger, Meaford Public Library's 2019 champion. We miss him dearly and hope he's with us in spirit. Our moderator this evening is the 2017 winner of Georgian Bay Reads for the Meaford Public Library and president of the Friends of the Meaford Public Library, Leslie Ransom. Leslie, the podium is yours.
Thank you. Since this is the first time that we're doing this online, there may be glitches, so I'm asking everyone to please be patient. Georgian Bay Reads brings together 5 local libraries to celebrate Canadian authors and communication between libraries in an event filled with lively discussion, good-natured competition, and an enthusiastic audience. The collaboration is also a celebration that kicks off the Ontario Public Library Week. Each library has a defender and a book, in hopes of convincing their fellow defenders and the audience members of their book's merit in a very lively debate. The winning defender brings home the trophy for their library. This year's Georgian Bay Read defenders are as follows. Representing the Springwater Public Library is Donna Kenwell. Representing the Meaford Public Library is Ashley Trussler. Representing Clearwater Public Library is Kieran Brupke. Representing Wasaga Beach Public Library is Ali Elder, and representing Collingwood Public Library is Suzanne McLean. Thank you, defenders, and welcome. We're going to begin round 1. Each defender will introduce themselves and their book, share the title, the author, and why it is that they chose their piece of fiction, Canadian, and why it will be the one that deserves the prize. We will begin now. Springwater, begin.
Thank you. Thank you to Jody for having the faith in me, I'm hopefully not misguided, to defend Springwater's book, and to family and friends who have supported me on this very interesting journey, particularly the Elmvale Book Club and Georgian Bay Books, who have been very supportive, but most importantly, Emma Donahue, who went above and beyond any expectation of an author, in addition to writing The Pull of the Stars, a fantastic book. This book is set in Dublin in 1918. At the height of the influenza epidemic. Like most of Emma Donahue's works, this takes place over a very confined period of time and a confined space. It is in a supply room that has been converted into an emergency maternity/influenza ward, so that pregnant women about to give birth aren't in an influenza ward and in hoping not to infect their children, and that women who are about to give birth aren't being influenced by these 3 women who have the flu and don't want to carry it into the wider maternity ward. So It's actually, as I said, little more than a supply closet, 3 cots, and a nurse, in this case, Julia Power, who is in the ward for a 14-hour shift, essentially on her own. There is an autobiographical component with this book, as I discovered in that one of the incidents with childbirth, actually Emma experienced. And it was interesting to learn how things had changed over a century and how things had not changed. I guess the biggest concern is the public reaction to the epidemic. And a chapter, an excerpt from the book says, on a fence, specific of a variety concert with canceled stamped diagonally across them, an advertisement for the affiliated hurling finals, postponed for the duration, pasted on it. So many shops shuttered now due to staff being laid low by the grip, and offices with blinds drawn down or regretful notices mailed up. Many of the firms that were still open looked deserted to me, on the verge of failing for lack of custom. Dublin was a great mouth hold with missing teeth. A man's explosive cough on the bench behind me, then another. Hack, hack, a tree being axed with too small a blade. The mass of bodies leaned away. That ambiguous sound could be the start of the flu or a convalescence lingering symptom. It could signify the harmless common cold or be a nervous tick caught like a yawn just by thinking about it. But at this moment, this whole city was inclined to assume the worst, and no wonder. Emma Donoghue published the book just at the beginning of the outbreak a year ago last March. At first, when I saw the review, I thought, this is a little too precious.
Sorry, Donna. The red light indicates that Donna is done. Thank you, Donna. We'll move on now to the Meaford Public Library. Ashley?
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley, and I'm the defender for the Meaford Public Library. I'm a library assistant here at the library, and I've been here for a little over 5 years now. And the book that I chose to defend is Birds Aren't Life by Keo McClear. So I chose this book as the best piece of Canadian nonfiction, initially because the cover drew me in and the gorgeous photographs inside the book. However, what struck me most is the universal nature of the elements of the author's memoir. Birds are indeed the thread tying the story together, but a love or even an interest in them is not necessary to appreciate McClear's overarching subject, that discovering what it means to be human, coming to terms with past decisions, and the ability to find strength, hope, love, and beauty in the smallest of life's wonders is the true pathway to personal peace. Many readers can connect to the idea of anticipatory grief that McClear discusses, whether it is coming to terms with the idea that your parents will pass in the future, or that the large wedding you've dreamed of your entire life will not be possible due to the ever-changing pandemic restrictions. We are all learning what anticipatory grief and loss feels like right now. At a time when the world feels like it's unraveling on a grand scale, when we are confronted on a daily basis with the news of the pandemic and restrictions to daily life, Birds Aren't Life acts as a source of much-needed comfort. It is a generous reprieve from the anxiety and the fear and the grief of our current world, and it teaches us a way to navigate through that grief and loss, how to look for beauty and enjoyment in the most unlikely places, and how to find contentment in the smallest of things. So a passage from the book says, "The birds tell me not to worry, that the worries that sometimes overwhelm me are little in the grand scheme of things. They tell me it's all right to be belittled by the bigness of the world. There are some belittlements and diminishments that make you stronger and kinder." Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. We'll hear now from Kieran in the Clearview Public Library. Kieran?
Thank you, and thanks to all the other defenders that are here today. So my name is Kieran Rucky, and I'm representing Clearview Public Library for Georgian Bay Reads 2021. I am here to champion the book Heartberries by the Indigenous author Therese Marie Myatt. Heartberries received critical acclaim upon its publication in 2018. A finalist for the Governor General's Award, it became a New York Times bestseller and a New York Times Editor's Choice, described as a sledgehammer. Her experiments with structure and language are in the service of trying to find new ways to think about the past, which might be saying a new model for the memoir. Heartberries was also chosen as a Best Book of the Year by NPR, National Public Radio in America, the Library Journal, the New York Public Library, and the Chicago Public Library. Ms. Myatt was born and raised on the Seabird Island Band, British Columbia. She received her Master's of Fine Arts from the Institute of American Indian Arts, and currently teaches creative writing at Purdue University, Indiana, and the Vermont College of Fine Arts. The diminutive size of this book is deceiving, for within these 124 pages is some of the most skillfully crafted prose I have ever read. Now, Heartberries is not an easy read by any means, in terms of both subject and structure. In Miss Myatt's words, I decided to be honest and trust the reader to walk with me. And I knew it would be disruptive and hard to read. I don't like neat narratives or formulas. I learned to make a honey reduction of the ugly sentences. Ms. Myatt uses her literary power to expose and explore the raw and complex truths of her personal experience with family, racism, trauma, love, motherhood, mental illness, and ultimately, survival. This is not a straightforward linear narrative. The cyclical, intimate stream of consciousness honors the entangled nature of memory, the fragmented, winding paths of darkness and light. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear from Wasaga Beach Public Library, Allie Elder. Allie?
Thank you. Yes. Hello, everybody. When my husband first came home with the announcement of the very first Georgian Bay Reads 12 years ago, we decided, all right, we would go to that. And we went to every one since. I always thought it was so marvelous that people would put themselves out like this and read the books, come and defend their book. And so when Kathy came to me in January and asked, would I do this? I just said, oh, sure. I could be the entertainment this year. So at that time, I did not have a title. It took me 2 or 3 days, I guess, only. And I found that Mary Lawson had a new novel coming out February 19th. So I pre-ordered that. As soon as it came, I gave it a read and thought, yep, this is it. So I let Kathy know. And then 5 months later, at the end of July, the jury for the Booker Prize, which is the richest and most prestigious literary prize in English, narrowed down their book selection from about 160 books down to 13. And they chose a town called Solace to be part of that group of 13. So I thought, all right, then I just have to figure out now how to try to convince everybody to read the book. They saw its merits. I didn't see its merits. So I'm going to try to do that. I'll tell you a bit about the story to start with. This novel is told sequentially by 3 main characters from 3 different age groups. The first character in this sequence is Clara. Now, Clara is 7, going on 8, and she at this point in time is devastated. her 16-year-old sister Rose has disappeared. She's been gone for over 2 weeks, and Clara cannot figure out what to do about it. Her parents are inaccessible to her at this time. Dad is a high school teacher. It's September. He's gone back to work, and in all his spare time, he is out searching for his daughter, searching the woods across the street from where they live, going door to door, neighboring towns, and Mother is just embroiled in her grief. And so neither one of them is accessible to this poor little girl who has to decide on her own how to deal with this. And her way of dealing with it is to park herself in front of the window, the main window in their living room. Then there's a side window as well. And she is going to stay there as much time as she can and watch for her sister to come home. Now, one day, just as the story begins, Clara looks out the side window at her neighbor's house, and a large blue car has pulled in. A man has got out, which is wrong. There should be no man there in her mind. And this person starts to carry in large boxes and park them in the house. Now, what does Clara do? She has no one to turn to. She has to figure out on her own. She is going to deal with this. She is going to make sure that he doesn't steal anything from her neighbor's place. The second character in this sequence is Mrs. Orchard, Elizabeth Orchard, who is the next door neighbor. She's the one whose house it is, and she is in the hospital right now, unfortunately, probably never coming home. She has a heart problem. The third perspective that we get is Liam Kane. He's the guy who has arrived in the car. He's the one who's bringing in the boxes, and he's a very confused person.
I'm sorry, Ellie. Thank you. Fifth person, representing Collingwood Public Library, Suzanne.
Hello everyone, I'm Suzanne McLean and I'm representing Collingwood Public Library. And for Georgian Bay Reads, I chose Missing from the Village, the story of serial killer Bruce McArthur, the search for justice, and the system that failed Toronto's queer community by Justin Ling. Missing from the Village is the story of 8 men who went missing from Toronto's gay village between 2010 and 2017. It's also the broader story of the LGBTQ community in Toronto and the story of that community's often strained relationship with the police. We know now that these 8 men were victims of Bruce McArthur, but it took years before he was brought to justice. Missing from the Village is a heartbreaking story of loss, of institutional failures, and of justice delayed. The author, Justin Ling, is a journalist and a member of the LGBTQ community. He writes lovingly about the church in Wellesley Village that he knows so well, and his deep compassion for the missing men is evident throughout this book. Ling writes with such depth, sensitivity, and nuance, and this is what makes Missing from the Village so much more than a true crime book. Rather than focusing on the killer, on his motives or his methods, Ling devotes much more time to the victims as they were in life. It's a tribute to them and also to their loved ones who lost so much and who were left for so long with no answers. I chose Missing from the Village because I think that it is the book that all Canadians should read this year. That's what Georgian Bay Reads is all about. It's about celebrating Canadian writing and Canadian stories. This is a Canadian story that everyone should know about. I chose a passage to read from the book, one that I found particularly moving. Here, Justin Ling is describing the importance of empathy. So he writes, "There's a reason why you're taught robotic dispassion in journalism school, not empathy. Because empathy hurts. Empathy means crying into your hands, sitting in a cafe while you write this book. It means making professional relationships with friends of the victims that turn into friendships that become ethical landmines. It means being unable to get the quote that your competitor got because you can't bring yourself to call the person you know is having a tough time. But I think the future is in empathy. I think what we can all hope for in this story is that we have learned something more for next time, because there will be a next time. There is unfortunately always a next time." What we can hope for is that next time we will all do a little better, the time after that a little bit better still, until we finally get it right. Thank you for everyone who read this book, and thank you for considering it for Georgian Bay Reads.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Suzanne. Well, that was a great intro. It's going to be a hard decision. I'm sure the audience is out there just trying to figure out which one of you will be the winner. We now, though, will begin 3 minutes of a free-for-all where you can ask each other questions about your books. You can defend your own book. That's why it's called a free-for-all. You have 3 minutes. Go.
I'd like to start with our Missing from the Village. I enjoyed the book as much as one is able to enjoy that topic, but I found the last 2 chapters of the book intolerable. To me, it detracted from the story and the trauma of the missing men by having a screed about all the ills foisted by police and by the general public on the gay community. And I really wish that the author had a stronger editor to end the book 2 chapters earlier, that we would have been left with still a very powerful story.
I have a question for the
Jump in. Just jump in.
Pull the stars question. So I wonder if everyone's thinking the same thing. We're all currently living through a pandemic. So why would you encourage other readers right now to read such a grim story about another pandemic where so many people die?
I actually fought against it because I thought I don't need to live this vicariously as well as in the person. But as Emma Donoghue pointed out, the influenza a century ago killed 4% of the world's population. And then tying it in with childbirth, which I haven't experienced, but at the time, a soldier in World War I had a greater chance of survival than a woman and baby in childbirth in Dublin. So I found that very compelling, and because it takes place in such a confined time, it is a microcosm of society of the time, of the upheavals and changes they're going through at the end of World War I and home rule and the class destruction.
Anyone else?
You know, I think, if I can chime in here too, we all like different styles of books. We all like different things. And for me, I like something that's fairly straightforward. And I don't, when I sense melodrama, people going over the top, and unfortunately I felt that Emma Donoghue really did that. And I also felt that the lady in the author of Heartberries did it. In Emma Donoghue, The Pull of the Stars, honestly, I have to say I had to stop reading that book more times than I can ever remember.
Unfortunately, ladies, that is the end of round 1. I am going to do it the way that we have been introduced because I sense a nervousness in everyone because it is round 1. So we have to vote off the first book. I'm going to ask that we begin from the first one to the last one. So we're going to vote out loud. Gentle person's agreement. Springwater, your vote.
Heartberries has to leave. An compelling story, but so shoddily written. And I know that it was a deliberate move, but no.
Okay. Meaford?
I'm going to vote for The Pull of the Stars. It was just a little too grim and reminiscent of what's currently happening for me.
Thank you. Clearview?
I'm going to vote for A Town Called Solace. Even though it was a good story, it just didn't grab me.
Okay. Osega?
As I was saying before, I've never read a book in a long time that I had to stop and start so many times as The Pull of the Stars. I felt that bringing a pandemic story out in the pandemic was it just killed me to read it. I read it last year and I just couldn't stick with it, so I'm afraid that I have to vote that one off.
Thank you. Collingwood, last.
I'm afraid I'm also going to vote for Pull of the Stars, and my reasoning was that I felt this, although Emma Donoghue is a Canadian author, the setting and all of the characters were Irish, and I felt that just for this particular setting, I just didn't feel it connected.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. The first book to be pulled off the table then, pulled off the table, is The Pull of the Stars. Sorry, Donna. Pull of the Stars is off the table. All right. Here we begin. Round 2. Each one of the defenders will have 3 minutes to describe your words in 3 words. You have a chance to do that, and we will begin with Collingwood.
Thank you. So the 3 words that I chose for Missing from the Village, the first one was tragic. This is a word that just kept coming up for me while I was reading the book. What happened in the church in Wellesley Village between 2010 and 2017 was an absolute tragedy, and one that befell a group of people who were already mistreated and marginalized in so many ways. And in many ways it was avoidable, particularly as it went on. The second word I would use, and it's one I've used already, is empathetic. Missing from the Village is told with so much compassion and sensitivity for these men. You can really feel as you're reading the void that was left behind when these men went missing and the desperation of their loved ones to find out what happened to them. I was left absolutely heartbroken while reading it, and I think that Justin Ling has done a wonderful service to these men and to their families. And then the last word that I chose was timely. So this is a book that I think everyone should be talking about right now. We should all be deeply concerned about the way marginalized communities are treated by institutions like the police. After the publication of this book, the results of the independent civilian review of the police investigation of the missing men came out and supported a lot of what Justin Ling said in this book. Particularly that systemic discrimination resulted in these crimes not being solved sooner. Major changes are needed in the way marginalized communities are treated by the police, and I think this is a topic that everyone should be interested in.
Thank you. Wasega.
Yes, my 3 words. First of all, maturity. This is a piece of literary fiction. Literary fiction is realistic, oftentimes unpredictable. So it is interesting in that way. And with a sequential way of telling these 3 stories, the whole thing gets wound tighter and tighter, woven tighter and tighter together, so that you can see how it all comes together in the end, the stories and the characters. The author takes great care with her characters. She commented that when a child goes missing, oftentimes it's the parents who are interviewed by the police, never the siblings. And so she took great care in the character of Clara as to how she would actually react to something like this and the devastation that she's feeling and not being able to get any help. My second word is balance. There are 3 characters from 3 different age groups. There are 3 different marriages that are looked at, one that's a failure, one that's a success, and one that's in crisis right now. There are 2 people who are dealing with childhood trauma, the one little girl who's dealing with it right now, and then a man who is dealing with the after effects of it still at this age. And I think these are all topics that are out there right now. The tone also is in balance. So although they're very serious and gut-wrenching things that are going on, with secondary characters in the novel, it keeps it light and balanced. Gloria, for example, the waitress of the Hot Potato, the only cafe that's open in town, she treats the new guy in town with great disdain. She doesn't bring his food on time, she's rude to him, etc. And even though he goes there every night for dinner, she still continues to consider him the new guy in town and is rude. However, when his soon-to-be ex-wife, he's in the midst of an awful divorce right now, when she comes to visit and they go to the cafe, Gloria suddenly is rude to the wife, and the man has now become a local. Liam has become a local. Martha, the roommate to the elderly lady, Mrs. Orchard, she also brings some humor. Like, this is a really serious situation. These are older ladies who are facing their own mortality. And yet Martha is able, when the nurse comes in to give her a shot, she's able to say, I hate being picked, I hate being poked, I didn't even like sex that much. And so it mitigates the seriousness of the situation. You smile in spite of yourself. And my final word is hope. This is a novel of hope. I'm going to be binged out again.
Sorry, you've been dinged again, Ellie.
I got it out. Hope.
You did get it out, though. Okay. Clearview.
Thanks. The three words that I chose to represent heartberries were power, truth, and survival. I'm going to put some quotes from the book to match the words. There are many points in the book where Ms. Myatt is writing to her now husband, Casey. So this is an instance where she is speaking to him. I had authority, a thing that people like you haven't witnessed. It comes from a traditional upbringing and regarding my work as something more sacred than generations of effort or study. It is something on a continuum, so far-reaching, you know it came from an inhuman place. Story is inhuman and beyond me, and I'm not sure you ever recognized that. You knew to be excited in proximity to my power. In the word truth, in interview, Miss Myatt explains that when she began her thesis novel that would become Heartberries, she started it as a work of fiction, creating a strong, outspoken female protagonist, but then decided to strip my fiction for the truth, turning to her personal journals and letters to craft her book. In Heartberries, Miss Myatt uses the word ugly to describe her experiences and her truth. Nothing is too ugly for this world, I think. It's just that people pretend not to see. Or she says, the ugly truth is that I lost my son Isidore in court, the Hague Convention. It's too ugly to speak this story. It sounds like a beggar. When Miss Myatt wrote her book, she said she had no idea how transformative it would be, but that pain is better than trying to forget about everything. It allows you to heal. And the last word is survival. And one quote that really got me on the second page was that Indian girls can be forgotten so well, they forget themselves. Although Ms. Myatt has been exceedingly generous in sharing her story with the world, I do feel her writing is primarily in service to herself and other Indigenous women. When I use survival, I mean it in terms of both spirit and body. The National Inquiry into Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls.
Time's up. last, Meaford.
All right, so the 3 words that I would use to describe my book, beyond the obvious of Birds Art Life, is introspection, curiosity, and courage. So introspection. The book is the author's attempt to write down her memories and her emotions that she has experienced in her life. It's a moment for her to reflect on why she made past actions, factors that affected her decisions, and how she feels about events now and if she made the right choices. Her introspective writing and healing through her journey encourages the reader that they are not alone and that they too can reevaluate decisions and choices that they have made in their own lives, and that they are on their own journey of working through their own feelings. The second word is curiosity. So the author demonstrates curiosity in the notion of being open to learning new things and partaking in new experiences. She shares the beautiful reward that comes from this curiosity. So I have a quote here. The more I encountered the reality of birds, the more my secondhand impressions of birds began to fall away. When I stopped seeing my idea of trees and started seeing infinite shades of green. When I looked at a swan's back and saw that each feather was an intricate masterpiece. And the third word I have here to describe this book is courage. So this memoir itself is an act of courage, of not only facing one's own feelings, but courageously sharing her raw emotions with the world. It is both a personal journey and a public journey when she shares it with us. So another quote here is, there are moments when what we need, what will benefit us most, is the power to style our own stories. So everyone handles grief in their own way. We don't have a plan, we're simply thrown from the boat and left to figure out how to keep her head above water. Being able to style her own story and to write her way through her grief is powerful and courageous.
Thank you. Okay, now, free for all means free for all. Don't be polite. You don't need to be polite. This is when you get to defend your book or, in other words, attack others. And make sure it is all a polite discussion, but please, you have 3 minutes. Go.
All right, Justin Ling inserted himself way too much, I thought, in that book. It was a lot about Justin Ling. And then I had a question about the cannibalism issue. There was a guy, I want to say his name was Bunter, I've got it written down anyway, who was involved in a fantasy website to do with cannibalism. And at a point, there was a theory that maybe MacArthur was involved with that. It was quite quickly dispelled, and yet there's an entire chapter given over to cannibalism and all of this, supposition, which I thought,
Yeah.
chop, get rid
Yeah,
of
I think
that.
a lot of the way Justin Ling writes reflects the way an investigation goes in real time, because he was involved in this in real time, and there are twists and there are turns and there are red herrings, and I think it does read that way, as though you're following that investigation.
Mhm.
I have a question about, or a comment, I suppose, about A Town Called Solace, and that was that I wonder how well, because the author does live in England and has lived there since the 1960s, can represent the North. And I noticed in this town, there were no Indigenous people. If it's supposed to take place near New Lisker, there were no French people. And I wondered if she had sort of transplanted her English experience into what was supposed to be Northern Ontario.
Okay, fair enough. So she did an interview on the CBC with Sheila Rogers that called The Next Chapter, in which she addressed that. She said she lived in a very, very small community, a farming community in Northern Ontario, until the late 1960s. I don't know if she was gone by 1970 or not. This book she's put in 1972, but it had to do with the age of the characters, she said, how she wanted to do that. So she didn't feel comfortable anyway having it later than that, because it's true she didn't live there full time until there. However, she's been back visiting and holidaying and bringing her family there, she said, every year since then. So her take on what she remembers is a town like that. So perhaps because it was a farming community and they were that close with family and so on, perhaps that wasn't part of her experience. And it wasn't part of the story that she was choosing to to tell.
Okay, another question for you. What do you feel was the takeaway from the story that you would use to encourage people to read it? I felt it was a nice read when I was reading it, but I didn't feel it was impactful or I had any lasting sort of.
Okay, fair enough. So do I get to answer it or are you going to ding me off? Yeah. So I've been dinged off with the hope before. I would say that the story promotes or gives the reader the idea that there is hope for possible redemption and atonement for things in the past. And if that's not something I can finish my sentence, I know I can.
You're pushing it.
And we are looking to atone right now in our society for sins of the past, for sure.
Thank you. Okay.
No, I'm
I
sure
think our
you're
little
allowed
lights
to.
are having a
Sure you're
little
allowed to
moment.
finish your sentence.
Thank you all. All right, it's time to vote. We are going to vote according to this. We are going to go from Meaford first.
Out
Vote.
loud. I'm going to choose A Town Called Solace, just because I didn't feel that it had that lasting impact for me.
Thank you. Clearview.
I'm sorry, I am going to vote for A Town Called Solace as well. Even though I did enjoy it, again, I didn't feel like it pulled me in enough.
Thank you. Wasaga.
Where am I going to go here? Okay, I'll say something about a book I haven't said anything about yet. That's Bird's Art Life. I was really keen to read it. I thought it had the cutesy cover that you were talking about, and I thought, okay, this seems really good. But by about halfway through, I found it repetitive, and I found it starting to look and sound like every journal book that I've ever made myself. So in the evening, you write something down, you reflect on it, you think how it's going to impact on your life. And then you draw a sketch of something you saw, and then you think, oh, I wonder what writers wrote about that, or it reminds me of a song, and so on. And that's what it started to sound like to me. So I'm going to veer off and say I'm going to call Bird's Art Life
Thank
off.
you. Collingwood.
I'm sorry, but I'm also going to vote for A Town Called Solace, just because
Okay.
like I said, it didn't feel authentic to me. It felt like maybe more of an outsider's view of Northern Ontario.
Thank you. And Springwater.
I'm going to have to go with Bird's Art Life. Nothing happened. Like there wasn't the revelation or the introspection that I expected there to be from an author of her caliber, and the insight wasn't there.
Thank you all. I guess that means A Town Called Solace is off the table. Sorry. All righty. It's getting interesting. All righty. Okay. I think this is the time I get to announce the Reader's Choice winner. Now, the Reader's Choice winner, this is just before intermission, is the votes that are tallied from about, I don't know, sometime in the fall to this Friday, October the 22nd. And according to our statistics, our book that is the Reader's Choice Award is Bird's Art Life. So congratulations, Bird's Art Life, which is the Meaford Public Library's contention for our winner for this year. I also would like you to grab something because it is intermission time.
I get a rock.
Go ahead. if you wish to. Sorry, we now will present it to Ashley.
No, it's not that one.
Little glitches.
Oh. What is this?
It's a copy of each of the books that were this year's contenders.
Yay.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alex. I have to, at this point in time, say that it is time for our intermission. Those of you in the audience, maybe grab something to drink, and the rest of us here will also have a deep breath before we begin the next round. And I want to encourage people out there in the audience to vote, of course, for the People's Choice Award. We'll be back in 10 minutes. Thank you.
Welcome to the Wasaga Beach Public Library. We're going into the library.
Welcome back, audience, and welcome back, defenders, to the second half of this entertaining book battle. It is a battle. The three books that are remaining are Birds, Art, Life, Meaford Public Library, Missing from the Village, Collingwood Public Library, and Heartberries, Clearview Public Library. Round 3 begins now. Okay. Each of you will describe how the setting of your book has an impact on the overall reader's experience. We will begin with Collingwood.
I think that Justin Ling does a great job of painting a portrait of the church in Wellesley Village in the 2010s. And I think that because I've never lived in Toronto, I'm not from there, but I felt after reading this book that I understood the character of the village and the close-knit element of it, despite it being such a big city. I also think that it's crucial that Justin Ling is a member of this community and that he's writing from his own experience. So he writes, "Today the village sits in the middle of a crossroads. To the north are upscale shops and sprawling office towers housing the headquarters of corporate Canada. West is Queen's Park, seat of Ontario's provincial government. South and east, however, is a mix of new condo developments, historic properties, single-family homes, social housing, and shelters. The neighborhood is a fault line for the stark class divide in Canada's largest city." Justin Ling is very careful not to romanticize the village too much, but to describe it to the reader in all of its complexity. I really felt that this book would not have been nearly so impactful had Ling not done such a good job of portraying the character of the city and the village.
Thank you. All right. Now we'll hear from Clearview, please.
Okay. Ms. Myatt boldly confronts the persistent stigmas surrounding mental illness when she shares her stories, journal entries, and letters written by her when she spent time in a women's behavioral health center, a psychiatric facility, and is diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, an eating disorder, and bipolar 2. I agreed to commit myself under the condition they would let me write. All the rooms were stark white, but the lighting was dim, so everyone looked bleaker. A dull blue stripe ran along every room for the invalids to follow. They gave me Ambien, and I walked the line. Stopping at every barred window, I wanted to hear the world, but the glass was too thick. Some of the ways that she describes her experience of mental illness are, I am finally beneath myself, at a new low. I'm stepping into my own undertow. My own valley is closing in on me. I curl into walls, ashamed at my cowardice. I am sick or possessed. The words that she writes when she's in the facility are some that I find are the most powerful. And I'll end with, the spirits used to possess people. We called it Indian sick. And it was the first illness to be accounted for. The only thing, the right thing, the thing that brought about our immunity, was the knowledge that something instinctual would carry us back. The awareness that our ancestors were watching was vital. I don't feel the eyes of my grandmother anymore. What I feel stuck with is something smaller, in a less impressive world. I woke up today confused, inside of something feminine and ancestral in its misery. I woke up to the bones of my ancestors locked in government storage. My illness had carried me into white buildings, into the doctor's office and the therapists, with nothing to say other than I need my grandmother's eyes on me, smiling at my misguided heart. Imagine their faces when I say that.
Thank you. Lastly, Ashley.
So based on the title of the book, a reader would initially guess that the setting of the story would be in a forest, or as the author takes a hike along a beautiful trail, or any other natural green landscape. However, the setting for Birds Art Life is the urban landscape of Toronto. So the city is, most Canadians are familiar with it, either through living there or visiting or seeing pictures. And even if you aren't familiar with Toronto itself, most people are familiar with an urban setting, which makes this a relatable setting as the reader journeys through her book. So a quote from the book says, I had learned on my journeys with the musician that beauty could exist in the most scarred, phenomenally impure places. I had witnessed how the usual story of urbanization, of humanity's estrangement from nature, was being revised through rewilding efforts. I had met city birders and local conservationists who were using a different environmental voice, one that could, in Naomi Klein's words, speak to the wounded as opposed to just the perfect and pretty. It was a voice that looked around the city's most blemished and broken places and said there is something left to love. So the urban concrete jungle is a stark contrast to the open and natural landscapes that coexist within Toronto. This choice of setting highlights that despite the noise and traffic, that there is quiet and tranquil moments still to be found. Similarly, even amidst inner turmoil or utter struggles that someone may be facing, there is still solitude and peace available to us if we are willing to welcome them.
Thank you. Okay. Now it's time for our free for all. Now remember, be polite, but also battle. This is your last almost chance to win either your other defenders over or to defend your own book voraciously. Go. 3 minutes.
Yes. Okay, I truly appreciate the author's personal experience that she shared in the book. However, the disjointed writing and jumping from one topic to another was really tedious to follow along with and cause more confusion than being simply a creative, raw narrative style. So how would you prepare a reader for this style of writing?
That's a good question. First of all, I would encourage them that it is not a large book and that it is the kind of book that will probably require more than one reading. I found that by reading it the second time, that I was much more able to get into the rhythm. And I found the disjointedness more, like personally didn't find that difficult. Because I think when you are in states of heightened emotion or memory, that sometimes you do loop around back to the same things. But I would say that it's a challenge.
Okay, Missing from the Village. This story focused heavily on the lack of response to this case by the police. And often when we read a story, there's a hero or a moment of growth for a character. But we do not see that in this book. What are the positives that a reader can take away from this story?
I think Justin Ling really points out that the LGBTQ community itself can do a better job in supporting its most vulnerable members. So every member of that community, because there are obviously people who are more marginalized than others within it. And I think he really calls to that at the end of the book. And as I read in my opening, that's at the very end of his book saying, the way forward is empathy. And that is the message that I took away from this book and for everyone to take away from it.
And I just want to respond to your take on the book, which I totally appreciate. But I did want to mention that Keo McClare's review is also in the front pages of the book. And that, in her words, the book is ache and balm. It is electric honesty and rigorous craft. I am so grateful to Therese Marie Myatt, a fiery new voice whose words devoured my heart.
You're so polite.
I know. You are. Okay, so one more question for Heartberries. Readers can usually take something away from a story when they're finished with it. So what would you say a reader could take away and apply to their own life from Heartberries? Oh, boo.
Oh, boo. Didn't get
That
the
you
chance.
can go through hard times and come out the other side.
Thank you.
That wasn't very eloquent.
Thanks, all three of you.
That was very good for a short.
All right. It is now time to
Oh.
vote off the third book. It's getting dicey. Okay, we'll vote according to this list. We'll go with Clearview first, please.
Although I feel like there's a lot of parallels in our books to do with marginalized communities and the value that's placed on their lives, I have to admit that I really enjoyed Bird's Art Life. So if I had to choose, I would take off Missing in the Village.
Thank you. Wasaga?
Yes, I would say Missing from the Village. I felt that I really did know the story of MacArthur beforehand. It was highly publicized. The messages that you alluded to, though, are true, and that wasn't in the media so much. But yes, Missing from the Village.
Thank you. Collingwood?
I think I very regretfully would vote for Heartberries. I liked it very much, but I think there was a strong focus on her romantic relationship with her husband, and I wanted a little bit more of a coming of age story, which is maybe the fault of the marketing of the book. That's what I thought I was going to get, and so it didn't quite meet my expectations.
Thank you. Springwater?
I'm going to have to go with Bird's Art Life. I mentioned my concerns earlier that there didn't seem to be a lot of introspection. Friends of mine who are birders are rapturous about it, and I didn't get that kind of compelling emotional reaction from the book. So as I said, why did it happen? So I'd have to vote off Bird's Art Life.
Thank you. Aha, number 2, Meaford.
And I'm going to have to regretfully vote for Heartberries. Just for me, reading it, I felt it very, like I said, tedious to go through, and I found it a difficult read. Just the writing style for me. But I love the cover.
Well, we have a tie. And it's been a while since I have moderated live, and I'm thinking about what we do in the event of a tie. And I'm wondering if I can get some direction.
Yeah.
Rock, paper, scissors.
We've done this before.
We have done this before,
Yes.
I just don't have directions here with me. And I'm wondering if I can get some directions. We'll take a minute just to seek that. It doesn't happen often, frankly, and not at this stage.
In a tie, the moderator
Oh!
Oh.
The direction is, in an event of a tie, the moderator decides.
Oh, that's tough.
Oh, this is very difficult. I have read all books, and I found them all very challenging in a different way. I am going to vote off Missing from the Village. I really thought Heartberries was very difficult, a horrible journey for a human being to go through, but it's First Nations and it's real, and that's what is putting me in favor of that one over that one, that's all. Missing from the Village is awful. I'm sorry. Okay, that takes us to round 4. Before we begin round 4, I have the pleasure of telling you who the People's Choice Award winner is. And it happens to be the Meaford Public Library and our defender, Ashley, for Birds Art Life. Ashley, would you like to come up? Congratulations for Birds Art Life.
Yeah. There you go.
Over here.
Yep,
Yeah.
you're good. You're on the camera.
Oh, sorry. Congratulations, Ashley.
Thank you.
We get to keep it. Okay. I also would like to announce the door prizes. Those of you who registered and are present will find that you were given a number which, if we were live, would be under your seat. But it's now given to you online. So the door prize winners who get a bag of books, like this, will need to contact their library to pick them up, okay? So the following people win the door prizes for tonight. Peggy Kirk, Myrna Nielsen, Diane Ohl, Kaiza Larson, and Beth Wilson. Congratulations, you people, and that is awesome. So, I hope you enjoy your books. All right. Now on to round 4, the last one. We have 2 remaining defenders. Ooh, it's getting down to the wire. So, my two last defenders, I would like you to describe the most intriguing character in your book and how that character affects the major events in the book. You have 2 minutes. Begin, Meaford.
Okay, so the most influential character in the book I chose was Akio McClear herself. Her courage to put her raw emotions, thoughts, memories, and regrets on display into the public eye, and her willingness to help others face similar struggles. So as a quote from her book, "Sometimes we falter not because the ground beneath our feet is unstable, but because it's exhausting to keep moving, to keep trying, to keep performing the same actions again and again. In the beginning, she is overwhelmed with the responsibilities of life and of trying to do it all. Through the story, she experiences an array of emotions and she works through her regrets, and by the end of the story, she learns how to take time for herself so she can heal, and that acceptance of oneself and one's choices is a step towards inner happiness. and that struggling is part of being human, but there is always hope to be found no matter what you are facing. And the last quote from her book that I really enjoyed was, "The birders I encountered in books and in the world shared little except this simple secret. If you listen to birds, every day will have a song in it."
Thank you. Wow. All right, and now we have Clearview, please.
Okay. Again, as these are both memoirs, and as Heartberries is a memoir, I would have to say that Ms. Myatt is the most intriguing person in her book. The opening sentence of Heartberries, "My story has been maltreated," speaks to her initial fear and trepidation of being trapped in a stereotype. In an essay that Myatt wrote for Mother Jones magazine, titled "Native American Lives Are Tragic, but Probably Not the Way You Think," she talks about how the tropes are porous and easy to get lost in. She explains the challenge for Native authors and artists who want to express the truth of their lives, which are sometimes affected by, yes, poverty and alcohol. These conditions are not unique to Native people, of course, but when they are applied to us, it feels definitive. No matter what we write, white people can turn our stories into weapons, an excuse to be paternalistic. If we depict ourselves as educated and self-sufficient, they might advance the narrative that our tragedies are long past, that we should dust ourselves off and move on. If we are portrayed as poor or dysfunctional or prone to addiction, they use that to take away services or argue that we game the system. In the end, Myatt states, "I don't know how we can be artists if we're worried about what white people will think of us. I feel we are failing when we allow the majority culture to burden us with its binaries. I want the freedom to be present in the tragedy of our lives and not be bound by it."
Thank you. Meaford?
What are we doing now?
Sorry?
Sorry, what am I doing now?
It's your turn.
Oh.
No, we both went.
Yeah, we both went.
Oh, I apologize. I
Sorry.
was busy writing. Sorry, my fault.
It was scaring me.
Stay on cue. Apologize. All right, now you have 2 minutes to make a final passionate case in favor of your book. I will begin with Meaford.
I didn't write anything for my passionate review of the end here, but what I felt is that this book just really helps, I feel, everyone who's going through any difficult time in their life. It shows you that there is the ability to take the time to reflect on your life, on the decisions you've made, and that it's okay to struggle. It's okay to take a step back from the difficulties and to open your eyes and ears to what's around you, and the ability to find peace and happiness in the small things in life. And this book, it doesn't tell you how to feel. It just sort of expresses her own personal emotions, and she just gives you sort of an example of someone who struggled and how she dealt with it, and how anyone going through something of their own personal grief can come through that. I lost my father last year, and this book was very touching in that way, that she just shows you someone struggling with something similar, and that there is a way through it. And the addition of the birds and nature and everything was a beautiful way to tie it all together. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, back to Clearview.
First of all, I'm sorry for your loss,
thank
Ashley. I still have doubts about the appropriateness of me speaking on behalf of Therese Marie Myatt, which is why I've depended a lot upon quoting directly from the book. I do not want to paint her as, her quote again, a hopeless illustration, something for white people to witness. But I do want to express that I do feel a personal responsibility as a settler in Canada, and that I wanted to use this opportunity to compel all of us to actively search out, read, and listen to the stories of Indigenous people. There are so many voices that have not only been historically, systemically silenced and ignored, but continue to demand truth, justice, and action today. Our sense of Canadian identity needs to shift in immediate and dramatic ways. It is our shared responsibility to work on not just truth and reconciliation, but accountability and action. Therese Marie Myatt's memoir, Heartberries, is both piercingly personal and starkly political. Ms. Myatt's reflections on her own life carry a message to every one of us as individuals and as Canadians. Diving deep into your history is really painful, but it could be better than trying to cover it up.
Ooh, thank you. Okay. This is the last free-for-all.
Was another one?
You have 3 minutes to do it. Away you go, girls.
Just us two?
Just you two.
Oh, I don't have any more questions.
Well, I'm going to jump in, and I'm still just going to say that I really loved the book, and that I think the part that really stuck out to me was this concept of, I have to write it down, of shifting baselines, and how these small changes in our ecosystems over generations, we don't even know what it used to be like.
Mhm.
And that how I think that's so easy to happen in an urban environment when people are may grow up and never be even exposed to nature. So I thought that was one of the most compelling parts. And then I know she talks about understory being sort of your quiet place. And so I just wondered, maybe with you, where do you go in nature to feel calm and
Personally?
still? Yeah.
I think just going out for walks, just being in nature, like a quiet hike or something like that. I personally lived in Toronto for a couple years, and I remember being on my balcony in a high-rise and seeing a bird flying over in Toronto, and that was one of the things that just reminded me when I was reading of the book. And I used to live near the Don Valley Parkway, and you could see the greenery out there, and just being able to walk in a space like that amidst an urban setting. Even in small towns, there's still that ability to be consumed by traffic and concrete, and just the ability to make the time to go and find quiet, if that is nature for some people. But yeah, just going out and having a nice fresh air and getting outside of a building, especially during a pandemic when you're all locked inside.
And
It's
do you have a
wonderful.
favorite bird?
Peregrine falcons are nice. I like those. And I used to have pet budgies. I used to have a lot of pets, but yeah. Yes. Yay.
Are you done? There's still time.
Oh,
You don't need to use it if you don't feel you have to. I'm not trying to,
30 seconds.
you're fine if you have no further.
I think that it well deserved the accolades from the People's Choice. It was a really enjoyable read and really
I think it's just relatable to
Really
a lot of
relevant.
people. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's not for everyone. It is a nonfiction, but it is, I do think it talks to a lot of people. And
Thank you.
Yay!
I think we
Okay.
can wrap it up at this point. All right, it is time to vote off the 4th book, which means the one that is not voted off will be the winner. And we begin with the 2 defending ones that are remaining. So we will start with Clearview. Vote, please.
so I really only have the one
You only
choice,
have your
right?
own or the other, yes.
Okay, so I will vote Birds Art Life.
Thank you.
Or did I say it right? Yes, I did.
Yes, you
Okay, I
did.
didn't mix it up.
You are voting off.
I'm voting off.
Okay. And obviously, Meaford?
I will vote off Heartberries.
That's no surprise. All right, the rest
No.
of you. Collingwood.
Heartberries.
Wasaga?
Art, Bird's Life.
You said birds aren't life?
Birds Art Life.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sorry,
I
it
said
was
Art
hard to
Birds
hear.
Life.
I wasn't. Springwater. Now what? It's a tie.
Birds aren't life.
Which means the winner is Heartberries. Congratulations. Karen, can you
Thank
come up?
you. Yeah.
I'd like to present you with the Georgian Bay Reads trophy, which weighs a ton to bring home to Clearview.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Well fought, by the way, all of you. That was a wonderful evening. It was a pleasure to listen to you. To the audience out there, I would like to thank all of you who tuned in, so to speak, to listen to our battle of the books for this year. And I'd like to thank the defenders especially for the passion they obviously showed with the one book that they chose to defend. All of the libraries, all of the volunteers and the publishers, everyone obviously is very supportive of Georgian Bay Reads. And we want to thank you for all the valuable time and energy that you gave to this particular event tonight. Safe travels home, everyone. Thanks again.